Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, MPs will today debate an issue which affects all of them. That's parliamentary constituency boundaries. You could be forgiven for thinking that the matter had been settled. Parliament voted in 2011 to reduce the number of MPs and equalise the electorates to about 74,000 people per constituency. The new system should have been used for the 2015 general election, but the coalition government couldn't agree. Today, a private member's bill sponsored by the Labour backbencher Afzal Khan seeks to reverse the government's plans to reduce the size of the House from 650 MPs to 600. Instead, the bill would aim to equalise the size of constituencies based on population. Well, Emma is in central lobby for us. Over to you, Emma.
Well, that's right. Under the current government plans, it could lead to a real scramble for seats here if the number of MPs is reduced by 50. But I'm here with a man who says, no, don't do that. Keep the number of MPs the same, but just change the constituencies a bit so that they have roughly the same number of voters. Labour's Afzal Khan has the second reading of his private member's bill in the Commons today. And I'm also here with Mark Harper, who was the minister in charge in the coalition when these original government plans were written up. So first of all, let me ask you this. The original intention of the government plans was to save money. You know, if we cut the number of MPs here, I'm sure the country will still tick over. So why not just do that?
Well, I think my feeling is that currently the government actually doesn't have a majority. There are people from all sorts of parties, including their own side, who are not happy with this change. Government says they want to save money, and our concern is what they're actually trying to do is reduce the MPs in the parliament, and yet keeping their own executive power at the same level, the number of ministers they have. In reality, what they're also doing is putting 260 unelected peers in House of Lords, which costs around 36 million. So where they're going with this, it doesn't add up, and that's why they don't have a support. I'm trying to build a consensus where we can bring all the different parties together so we can have changes which are necessary.
OK, Mark Harper, let me ask you this then. Could this damage democracy? Why isn't this a sensible suggestion?
Well, look, I think the root cause of why we brought forward our proposals in the first place and the present law that we're trying to do to reduce the number of MPs is very simple. We want to get constituencies to be of broadly equal size, plus or minus 5% to a 10% range, so that constituents are equally represented across the country. We also thought it was sensible, this was in the wake of the expenses scandal, to reduce the cost of politics, to reduce the number of MPs. The House of Commons is actually one of the largest lower houses of Parliament. Afzal's right, the House of Lords has got bigger, although the cost of running the House of Lords has come down as well. And I, of course, was the minister that wanted to bring forward proposals to elect the other place, although we never managed to get those through. So I think the proposals we've currently got in place, we've got a boundary commission that's going to report next October, and then Parliament will be able to vote on their specific proposals. The problem, the effect of Afzal's bill, it'll just kick that into the long grass again. This is the second time, or third time, the Labour Party has tried to push this off into the future, because they don't want to equalise the size of those constituencies in practice. And I think it's a really important principle that voters, wherever they are in the country, are equally represented here in Parliament.
Well, it's been thought that the original plans would benefit the Conservatives more. So is this Labour just about Labour trying to protect its share?
No, that's not true. The bottom line is we've got support from across the board, including people from Conservative parties. So it can't be simply about Labour Party. What we are saying is actually that the formula that we are giving, I think, is much more fairer. There is the idea of equalising. Of course, we're not against that. But the point there is that there is real life outside. By having this variation, which is 7.5%, which actually allows us to adapt us, to keep the communities together. Don't forget, we're here to serve the community. If we start breaking that up, that's the people who lose out, and we want to protect that.
I mean, do you think people outside this House really care that much about, you know, even what a constituency is or how big it is, just that the people who are elected do the job? You know, does it really matter to voters whether we reduce or keep the same number of MPs?
Well, I think the important thing is that voters outside feel they're equally represented in here. And the problem at the moment is there are some constituencies where you only have 40,000 electors electing a member of Parliament, and in other constituencies you need twice that number.
So why not just change the shape of constituencies?
So we need them broadly equal. So we're doing two things: broadly equal in size, and that's what our proposals do. Afsal's bill this morning actually widens that out a bit, and I don't support that. But also, we did think it was right to reduce the number of members of Parliament a little bit. It's not a massive reduction, but we thought that was sensible. And I have to say, it was one of the most popular policies that the coalition brought forward. And if the answer to the question you're asking is let's have more members of Parliament, I don't think it's the right question.
How much money would it save if we had 50 less MPs?
It would save around £13 million a year, so it would be £66 million over the Parliament. So you can argue it's not the largest sum in the world, but £66 million is not a trivial sum of money, and I think that could then be spent on our public services.
But your plans wouldn't do that?
No, but what they do is making sure that we maintain the balance. Parliament is sovereign. We need to make sure that the Member of Parliament who are here can hold the executive to account. So what they are doing is making the executive more or less the same, which is big, trying to reduce the MPs as a smaller number. And this is where the relationship breaks down. And this is why they don't have the support. And it's not just Labour Party. It's all the different parties are actually saying this is not right, and MPs from their own side saying this. So I think what I'm saying is sensible. It does have a support, and we can still go ahead. It's not the idea that we don't want the review. We are quite happy with it. When we were in power, when the review went even against us, we didn't block it. We kept it and took it through.
Okay.
So I don't think it's fair to say that we don't want these reviews. We do want reviews. We do want equalising as well.
Okay.
But we want to maintain
We
that
will
together.
see what happens with your plans in the Commons today. Afsal Khan, Mark Harper.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, the current government proposals to reduce the number of MPs could take effect if this goes ahead by the next election in 2022. That's unless the Labour plans derail this.
Thank you very much indeed. Tim, the impetus behind boundary changes was partly about reducing the cost of Parliament, and it really arose in that time after the expenses scandal when MPs were even more despised than perhaps they are now. Do you feel like the sense of urgency behind this issue is slightly gone? Is it deflated as an issue?
I think there are bigger issues at the moment, and it does. £66 million is a lot of money, but compared to some of the sums that the government are having to deal with, it's relatively small. And I'm very sympathetic, actually, to the Labour argument. In some respects, is that the real problem is the House of Lords. I think outside of the People's Republic of China, it's the biggest legislative body in the world, and the costs are beginning to be controlled, but it's the unelected lords and people turning up, not working particularly hard. Many do, but many don't. And I think that's the real affront to the taxpayer and to democracy.
But it's curious that across the political divide, there seems to be consensus. You're nodding, Helen, that the House of Lords is the real problem. Isn't the issue with boundary changes that even on the 1st of December, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, and when MPs are potentially going to lose their own seats, they're going to resist any changes that could put them out of a job?
Yeah, I mean, the moment that supply and confidence deal with the DUP was signed, then the boundary change reduction from 650 to 600 was dead as a dodo, deader than a dodo, because the DUP would be affected by it. And that is the problem, is that boundary changes only create obvious losers. And actually, I think the other thing is that it's felt that structurally Labour has currently got a small advantage, and so definitely the idea of reduction would not be one that finds favour with Labour. So who is left to vote for this? But yeah, I do agree with Tim. There is a problem. It is mad in 2017 that we still have hereditary peers in the House of Lords, and it is kind of very strange that we have people who can clock in once every couple of months, drop in, treat it as a kind of gentleman's club. There are lots of peers who work incredibly hard and their input is incredibly useful, and we could just have them and not the other guys.
But this bill's not going to go through, is it?
I don't really see any future for this, but this was it speaks to a big problem about this legislative session, which is that there is really very little domestic legislation at all. There's the domestic violence bill, but people are kind of desperately trying to hang bits and pieces where they can and get through private members' bills, because actually Brexit is just crowding everything else out.
It is a great shame, though, because I thought after Grenfell in particular, there was a real opportunity to do something big on housing. I think that's where the nation's mood was. And actually, I think there was possibility for Labour and the Tories to get together on building council houses. Sajid Javid, the community secretary, was open to that possibility. And it was always my concern about Theresa May. She's not a bold thinker, and she's not been able to see opportunities out of a tragedy like Grenfell and said, let's fix something so that these people didn't die entirely in vain.
But on the issue of improving the quality of Britain's democracy, making Parliament more accountable, making people feel they've got a stake in it, why isn't there more of a momentum, as it were, behind reform of the House of Lords? Clearly, it stirs passions on both sides of the House. People across the political divide say that the House of Lords is a much bigger problem than boundary review, but no one's actually talking about House of Lords reform at the moment. Seriously, are they?
No, and it's one of those issues that every government tries to nibble away at, and again it just sort of stalls because it creates, and actually weirdly housing is another very good example of this, something that creates a lot of very specific losers but a very disparate group of winners is very hard to do in politics. And that's exactly the same with house building, which is if you built more houses, which is fundamentally what we need, lots of people would have their back garden overlooked by a tower block and they wouldn't like that. But the people who would win from that policy currently don't have a vote through the planning system. So it's exactly the same system, is problem with the Lords, which is that actual, physical human beings would be ejected out, but the improvement of democracy is much more diffuse and hard to quantify.
OK, well, maybe the improvement of democracy is the sort of thing we talk about, but people out there don't care about. Who knows?